ago. Some at a very high level and important to Iran and Iranian culture. And those targets and Iran itself will be hit very fast and very hard. The USA wants no more threats. The 52 hostages harks back to the beginning of the US-Iranian schism 41 years ago. The American embassy in Tehran was overrun by revolutionary students, and diplomatic staff were held prisoner for 444 days. That standoff ultimately cost President Jimmy Carter a second term in the White House. Donald Trump is evoking that memory to justify his uncompromising approach to this 2020 crisis. But threatening cultural as well as military targets will enrage Iranians further, and carrying out such attacks could constitute an international war crime. The official mourning for Iran's top military commander still has 3 days to go before his burial in his hometown. The likely retaliation for his death is forcing the UK to increase security. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace announced that the Royal Navy would resume protection of British vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. HMS Montrose and HMS Defender will be deployed as they were last year after an oil tanker was seized and others attacked. The aftermath of the killing of Qasem Soleimani has already seen rockets fired close to the US Embassy in Baghdad. There's also been an apparent cyber attack on an American government website. This should be the homepage of the Federal Depository Library program. Much worse is expected. Ian Woods, Sky News, Washington.
And this morning, President Trump's been busy again on Twitter. He said the United States just spent $2 trillion on military equipment. We are the biggest and by far the best in the world. If Iran attacks an American base or any American, we will be sending some of that new, brand new, beautiful equipment their way and without hesitation. In the past hour, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif responded. He said, having committed grave breaches of international law in Friday's cowardly assassinations, Donald Trump threatens to commit again new breaches of just cogents. Targeting cultural sites is a war crime, whether kicking or screaming. End of US malign presence in West Asia has begun. Those masquerading as diplomats and those who shamelessly sat to identify Iranian cultural and civilian targets should not even bother to open a law dictionary. Just cogents refers to peremptory norms of international law, i.e. international red lines. That is a big no-no. Well, this is the scene live in Ahvaz in Iran this morning, where crowds are gathering, as you can see, waving flags, a funeral procession in honour of Major General Qasem Soleimani. We saw similar crowds gathered yesterday. Today, we're expecting these to continue in Iran and indeed in neighbouring Lebanon. Well, let's bring in our Foreign Affairs editor, Deborah Haynes, who's here in the studio this morning. Good morning, Deborah. A really incredibly uncomfortable diplomatic position for the UK to be in, because we heard the Foreign Secretary this morning on Sophie Ridge on Sunday trying to tread a very difficult line between trying to ramp down the rhetoric as much as possible, but equally not to annoy their ally in the United States.
And also, Britain wasn't consulted before America decided to take this significant escalation in a long-running conflict between the United States and Iran that was really triggered in terms of this heightened tension by Donald Trump pulling out of the nuclear deal a couple of years ago. But yes, Britain very concerned about the potential for this escalating into an actual direct confrontation between Iran and the United States. Sorry, and a new Middle East war. And why is Britain worried? Obviously because anything that the United States does in terms of any kind of retaliation to an Iranian strike against them, or any kind of response that Iran has said it will do, means that Britain will then potentially be in that situation of maybe having to support the Americans, potentially even with military force. And also, British troops in the region are very much similarly exposed to the threat. Iran doesn't distinguish too much between the United States and Britain. It sees the UK as the sort of little Satan to the US as big Satan. And as we can see from these scenes, emotions incredibly high in Iran. There's going to be more of this funeral happening in Tehran tomorrow, with Qasem Soleimani's body being being sort of respected there before his final funeral on Tuesday. The Supreme Leader said there's 3 days of mourning, and then after that, people are bracing for some kind of response, despite those comments by Trump threatening a counterattack.
And Deborah, we saw these scenes of politicians in Iran chanting death to America, giving us a real sense of the scale of the rage being felt in response to this killing. I suppose what everybody, all the commentators seem to be saying is inevitable, is there's going to be some sort of retaliation, a sort of ramping up of tit for tat between the two nations. The question is, I suppose, how long that could go on for and what the casualty count could be.
And also whether Iran really wants that and whether it can sustain that. This isn't a strong country in terms of its economy. It's also been dealing with significant protests against the regime, and yet the killing of Soleimani really does seem to have united a lot of Iranians in outrage to the attack. And you've actually got a tweet by one of the communications minister goading Trump, comparing him to Hitler. This is Azari Jaromi saying that Trump is a terrorist in a suit, and he's using the hashtag hard revenge. And so that gives you a sense of how they're feeling. But for Britain, like you said, the Foreign Secretary is on this mission to try to de-escalate. They're also going to be mindful of the impact on Iraq. Today we've got Iraqi MPs meeting in an extraordinary session. They're going to be discussing whether to kick US forces out of Iraq. The troops, 5,000 or so troops in there at the invitation of the government to fight Islamic State. British forces also there, and they will doubtless be impacted if American troops are told to leave, because Iraq does see the attack on Soleimani and also airstrikes on Iraqi soil against Iraqi militias by the US as a breach of its sovereignty.
Grave times. Okay, Deborah, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's get more on that now. US President Donald Trump has vowed to hit back very fast and very hard at Iran if the nation commits to revenge over the killing of its top military general, Qasem Soleimani. Well, we can now speak to the Independent's Middle East correspondent, Patrick Coburn. Very good morning to you. We've been hearing from the Foreign Secretary efforts to try and de-escalate matters this morning, and yet if you look on Twitter, there seems to be a serious ramping up of this enormous row between Iran and the United States.
Yes, but I don't think we know yet how Iran is going to respond. There could be something very serious, like an invasion by protesters of the American embassy compound in Baghdad. That could happen very quickly, a takeover like we had in Tehran in 1979. That would really set us on the road to war. More likely, I think, that the Iranians will play it cool, whatever they're saying, and they will look for a long-term revenge, probably pushing the Americans out of Iraq, but not through military action, but through the Iraqi parliament and the Iraqi paramilitaries. I think that's their most likely response.
I mean, it's a huge gamble, though, isn't it? I mean, we're seeing British naval ships being put into the Strait of Hormuz to accompany British-flagged ships in case things go wrong. We've heard British tourists in Dubai and Turkey being warned to be vigilant. There is a risk of accidental war in all of this.
Absolutely, because we have this very dangerous game of chicken between Iran and the US. The Iranians were almost certainly behind missile attacks, drone attacks on Saudi oil facilities in September, or shooting down a US drone plane in June. US didn't respond militarily, so it seemed to under-respond then. It over-responds now, to my mind. But all this is sort of up in the air. It all seems to depend on what Trump just saw on television and what he's responding to.
Which makes them incredibly unpredictable. What about the chances of a cyber war, if not an all-out war? I mean, I know that GCHQ, there are reports this morning in the papers that their listening services are really focusing on Tehran potential hackers, and we've seen overnight American government websites having been hacked. Do you think that that's a more likely option for the Iranians?
I really don't, because it's, you know, it's sort of the topic of the hour, cyber attacks. But where do they get anybody in any sort of combat like that, the US is far more technically proficient than Iran. I think it's one of the things that people talk up. What one has to look to is something much more concrete. In 1988, the US naval vessel accidentally shot down an Iranian plane between Dubai and Bandar Abbas in Iran, killing a lot of people. Time passed, and then we had Lockerbie, when a plane was blown up in the air. Probably the Iranians behind it, probably that was their counterstroke, never proved. They have been talking about 1988, that plane, as an example of what they could do in Tehran. I rather doubt if they do it. A full-scale war is really not in Iran's interests. They've been doing a lot of things just below that level. I think they'll go on doing that, but I think they'll try to avoid responding in kind to the killing of Soleimani.
Let's talk about the UK government's position. This is a Brexit government. They have aligned themselves more with the United States deliberately. Not so much a special relationship as a sort of dependent relationship at the moment, isn't it? An incredibly difficult position diplomatically because they can't stay neutral on this. They have to take a position, and effectively they can't support Iran, so they're going to have to fall behind the US on this. And if it's all-out war, that drags us in, doesn't it?
Not quite. We're not in an all-out war yet. I think they could take a decision, as Tony Blair could have taken in 2003, not to take part in any such.
But it's a very different government from Tony Blair's government.
Yeah, but some of the considerations are the same, because you don't want to be involved in somebody else's adventure when you don't have any control over what they do. Trump didn't tell the British government what he was going to do. If Britain does the same thing as the US, as a sort of dependent ally, they'll have all the responsibility for what happened and none of the influence to guide it or stop it.
What do you make of some of the American press overnight drawing links between President Trump's impeachment and this airstrike? There are links between President Clinton trying to delay his impeachment process back in 1998 and launching airstrikes on Iraq as well. Do you think it could have all been a rather cynical tactic from POTUS?
I think that, in the White House, the impeachment, the next election, is not something which is out of their mind for more than a split second. So that probably is a consideration, that he didn't want to look weak. He was being portrayed as weak and vacillating after various Iranian actions over the summer that I mentioned. And, it's very arbitrary. Nobody, his own advisors, don't know what he's going to do next. According to the American press, the option of killing Soleimani was only put there by the US military to make some other options look a bit more moderate, who are completely astounded when that was the option that Trump took. So for a British government, being too closely linked to somebody over whom you have no influence and whose judgment you don't trust is a very dangerous position.
And just lastly, a final word on Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. The Foreign Secretary saying she's never far from his mind in all of this. She has spoken to her husband on the phone, albeit briefly, to say she is concerned this is going to affect the length of her detention in Iran. What do you think?
Well, you can't quite tell, but I'm sure one suspects she's sort of right, that the hotter the political atmosphere is, the more likely it is that she will be confined longer, that it's not a moment that one would expect the Iranian government to do something which would be in the nature of a concession to a US ally. So, that's negative news, but how negative it is difficult to judge.
Patrick Coburn from The Independent, really good to get your thoughts as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the death toll from the Australian bushfires rose to 24 overnight. The latest fatality happened in the town of Batlow, where a 47-year-old man died whilst defending the home of a friend. Across the states of New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia, almost 2,000 homes are now known to have been destroyed. Milder temperatures today have brought brief respite to some areas, but that's only temporary, with the Prime Minister Scott Morrison warning that there was still months to go until the end of bushfire season. Well, they are still burning in all states and territories right across Australia. Some of the most serious and life-threatening are in New South Wales and Victoria. And Sky's Alex Crawford has seen the scale of the fires from the air in Bateman's Bay in New South Wales. But first, Sky's Tom Cheshire reports from Lake Tyers in Victoria.
It looks like the aftermath of a detonation, and in a way it is. The bushfires have created entirely new weather systems, with lightning and tornadoes. This is what lay beneath a pitched battle against the fire.
While the weather conditions have improved, as you would have heard, as reported from New South Wales and Victoria, there are still many fires that are raging, and there is a very significant firefighting effort which is continuing.
Today, though, further south in Bairnsdale, Victoria, it began to rain. It felt like hope, and so did this. Truck after truck came from all around the state to deliver animal feed to the remote farms that have been ravaged by fire.
Let's go.
They're all volunteers. Some of them are victims of the fire themselves, determined to help others.
Look, everybody's got together. The Livestock Agency, the Shire, Need for Feed, many other organisations have turned up. The word's got out that we needed a bit of feed and produce and whatnot, and yeah, it's been absolutely overwhelming. Haven't had time to think. Defended my own house in Nicholson Monday night, stayed up all night. Drove to Buchan in the morning to check out my farm. Mum and Dad's place is gone. Father-in-law's place is, parents are gone.
The convoy set off.
Today's a chance for recovery, and this is an extraordinary operation. This is only the first few trucks. You can see them going off now. They're all volunteers. Some of them have suffered a lot in the fire themselves, but they're on their way to help devastated communities.
These animals were evacuated to safety before the fires. Now they're trying to get them back home. Here in Victoria, at least, to get back to normal.
The crews are heading into danger and almost certain whiteout. They are trying to contain fires which are moving with a frightening ferocity. They're working in stifling heat with temperatures well over 40 degrees Celsius. He just dropped 3,500 litres then. It barely made a difference. The crews have to repeatedly refill, and still the fires keep coming. Bateman's Bay is a popular tourist destination, but the most intense blazes here have turned the skies a bright amber. The crews are manoeuvring near blind, dropping what seems like trickles of water in comparison to the giant bushfires. You can hardly make them out in this suffocating smoke fog as they try to stop the fire's relentless and unpredictable move towards homes and farms. Pilot James Williams is only 26, but he's clocked up a staggering number of hours in his short career battling the bushfires.
Have you been shocked by what's been happening, what you've seen?
Yeah, it's shocking just how easy these fires have started and how quick they move.
But with winds of more than 80 miles per hour, the firefighting authorities simply can't keep up with the breakouts.
This is what the New South Wales fire authorities are having to put up with. These fires start from nowhere and they've gone and spread incredibly quickly. Very difficult for them to stop it.
But while bushfires rage in some areas, others just a few miles away are spared this time. And they're doing all they can to try to look after the starving and displaced wildlife. Dozens have been looked after here for the past 6 weeks as the fires rampage through their bush home. The family is intent on saving lives, both animal and human. 4 of them are volunteer firefighters, doing one of the most dangerous jobs in the state right now. And Mum Carrie and the 2 youngest want to join up as well.
With the climate change, we'll need more firefighters. It's going to become more of a, the southerlies hit, oh, now the fire's going to come towards us.
That's quite a
Oh, yeah. We've got a fire down at Merry Beach, so that'll be heading this way now. So, yep.
Someone has to do it.
Yeah, somebody has to do it.
Do you feel it's a community duty, almost? Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Well, you can't all just stand and watch, because then what's going to happen if we do that?
But first they have to survive the fires circling them and causing so much smoke the sun disappeared mid-afternoon. Alex Crawford, Sky News in New South Wales, Australia.
Well, the race to replace Jeremy Corbyn has well and truly started, with 4 of the 5 current contenders hitting the airwaves this morning. Last night, Sir Keir Starmer joined Lisa Nandy, Jess Phillips, Emily Thornberry and Clive Lewis in the contest, with others expected to declare in the next few days. Well, joining us now from Westminster is our People and Politics correspondent, Nick Martin. Good morning to you, Nick. Sir Keir Starmer, the latest to throw his hat into the ring and very much the favourite, but as we've seen from previous Labour leadership contests, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win.
Yes, one after another now, leadership hopefuls are setting out how they believe they will take the Labour Party from what it is today, and that's a party that's licking its wounds from a disastrous general election to a party that might once again be ready for power. And Keir Starmer, Jess Phillips, Emily Thornberry, Lisa Nandy, they've all been hitting the airwaves today to explain what it is about them as individuals. They have what it takes to persuade predominantly the Labour membership that they should be taking over from Jeremy Corbyn. And it's all about the direction of travel, what went wrong in the past, how they need to learn from those lessons, and how they can take the Labour Party into the future. And we're going to hear from 3 of these candidates now. Lisa Nandy, the Wigan MP, Jess Phillips, the MP for Birmingham Yardley, prominent backbencher, and Sir Keir Starmer, the shadow Brexit secretary. Here are their pitches.
I did spend a few weeks after the election just trying to work out whether I was the right person to do this and whether I should put myself forward, and why I went to Ashfield to listen to the voters that we'd lost. Take it on the chin. It was quite hard, to be honest, and it was quite heartbreaking and quite emotional to listen to. But when people said we need a different sort of leadership and a different sort of leader, I thought that now is the time to step up.
This election blew away the argument for a second referendum, rightly or wrongly, and we have to adjust to that situation. The argument has to move on, and the argument now is, can we insist on that close relationship with the EU, close economic relationship, but collaboration in other areas?
What our job is for the next 3 years is to hold Boris Johnson to account on all the promises. So if we are living in an absolute paradise of trade and we're totally safe in the world and we're not worrying about having to constantly look to America for our safety and security, then maybe we'll be wrong, maybe I'll be proven wrong. But the reality is if our country is safer, if it is more economically viable to be in the European Union, then I will fight for that, regardless of how difficult that argument is to make.
And many of them were asked whether they thought that Jeremy Corbyn was a good leader. And to be frank, it was a question that was dodged time and time again, and there's good reason for that. All of these candidates desperately need their pitches to be forward-looking. Yes, acknowledge what went on over the last few weeks and months, but to say that they're the person who is in place and ready to take the Labour Party into the future. But in many ways, they're caught between 2 or 3 split sections of the Labour Party. There's the huge number of Labour members who are very loyal to Jeremy Corbyn, who thought he was a good, effective leader, who believed in his policies despite the disastrous election result. And there are the sort of more traditional Labour members who have seen the way the party has changed in the last few years and want to try and revert back to what it was like in the 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago. And these candidates need to please both of those extremes, and that's not going to be easy.
Square that circle. Nick, thanks very much indeed. We're watching Sky News. Coming up in the sport, we'll have news of big upsets as the American football playoffs get underway, and we'll all have the latest from Cape Town, where England are involved in a thrilling test match against South Africa.
What's going to happen now? It's like a war zone in Hong Kong. They have lost control.
Stuart Ramsey is there for us. Stuart, what's going on?
Hey, I'm not sure if you can hear me. That was
was beginning a really an epic few hours. We had no idea what was about to happen.
Why are you questioning him? He's clearly marked as press.
We knew that what we were broadcasting and what we were showing the world was significant.
It definitely felt like Hong Kong was burning.
I never saw myself as a person, I always saw myself as a bodyweight.
Oscar was just 14 when his love of cycling spiralled into something darker. He's talented, but a belief that losing weight would make him faster slowly slipped into an all-consuming eating disorder.
I had very low self-esteem. It wouldn't take much if someone told me, oh, you're looking healthy. I'd take that as an, I'd be like, oh my God, I need to lose some weight. I look normal. When it was at its worst, I would probably have a small bowl of porridge, I'm talking like 20 grams of oats, go out on a 3-hour ride, come back, miss lunch, and kind of just sleep because I was knackered, but I thought if I sleep, I'm not going to be hungry.
Encouraged by his cyclist peers, at his lightest, he weighed just 45 kilos. Now 19, he's recovering, but the weight loss caused a dramatic dip in his hormones. The result, lasting osteoporosis. He's being supported by a leading sports dietitian who says it's a burgeoning problem. In just the last year, referrals to her clinic have increased 5-fold, and every single new male client is a cyclist.
It's a really fine line. It's a really, really fine line between being light enough to perform optimally and then being so light that it actually starts to affect your mental health and your physical health.
She says the problem is encouraged by social media, accounts promoting weight loss and professionals like Chris Froome promoting the scantity of their breakfasts. There's been an explosion in the popularity of cycling in the last decade. Many more young people inspired to push harder and maybe even go professional. In that context, therefore, many say the responsibility for keeping riders healthy lies with the teams and the coaches.
Okay, let's get the latest from South Africa and all the cricket with Jackie in the Sky Sports Centre. Jackie.
This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality, committed to getting 100 million people 20% more active by 2025.
Looking ahead then to next year, what's the focus? What's the next fight?
The next fight is maybe going to be OICK, who's Ukrainian boxer, moved up to heavyweight, or Khoram Abad. I think he's Bulgarian, talented fighter as well. And that's because I have to defend my titles.
Boxing obviously a very dangerous sport. We saw what happened to Patrick Day. Such sad news.
Yeah.
You've got a son yourself.
Yeah.
Would you want him to get involved in the sport?
Yeah. He'd be better than me. That's what you want for your kids, right? You want them to be better than you. And I know the lessons it teaches you and the environment it puts you in, the people it puts you around, and you learn really good skills. So I know how dangerous it is, but like Patrick Day, may rest in peace. I'd rather something happen doing something he loved than something happen doing something that he hates.
You've lost a lot of weight yourself. Talk us through your kind of daily diet.
When I'm training, sometimes I'll train on an empty stomach, then I'll come back and eat again, train, have something after training, then eat again in the evening. So it's probably 4 times a day.
Do you ever cheat and have burger and chips?
Always, of course. I deserve that, at least. I like them. I love brownies and ice cream and stuff like that.
In your kind of downtime, what do you do?
Stuff like this.
Well, that's fun. How about chess? I heard you play chess. Is that true?
I was banging out chess in New York. We were playing for 5 days straight. But what do I do in my downtime? Honestly, a little bit of sauna steam.
Computer games?
Sometimes FIFA. I play as well. I'm a proper player as well. I play. Everyone wants to win their team.
I think Watford do, don't they? Isn't that your... Do you support Watford?
Yeah. Watford's my team. But I play at Christmas a lot with boys because it's my time off. But I love playing football. That was my first passion for sport.
And what do you make of Watford at the moment? Because they're right at the bottom of the Premier League table, aren't they?
You know what it is? It's football. You're up and down, man. It's just a season. So if it ain't good this season, they'll get it right the next season.
Speaking of football, this year we've really sadly seen lots of racist incidents. What do you make of that? People like Raheem Sterling speaking out.
He's doing a great job. I think it's not important to just talk about racism. I think we have to look at the person that's making it an issue and just understand what drives them to be racist and where they've learnt certain piece of information.
Have you ever experienced racism in boxing?
Nah. I always say I think they're too scared. I think they're smarter than that.
So how did you get into boxing in the first place?
So I grew up in Watford, getting in trouble. So I was on tag, so I was bored. I started chilling with Benga. I had to be home every day at 8 o'clock for like 14 months. Benga was boxing, and I was like, yeah, I could do this.
How many fights do you think you've got left in you?
Like 14, 15. Take me to 35, 40 fights maybe.
How do you reflect on the last 12 months? I mean, it's job done really, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think two parts really. There's the European Championship qualifiers, and then there's the Nations League, which nestled in the middle. So if I looked at the Nations League from the start of the competition, which you have to really, what was our objective? Our objective then was to get to the semi-finals, which, given the quality of the group we were in, was really pleasing. Really good performances. Croatia, both games, and away in Spain in particular. And then we had this long 6-month wait for the semi-finals, and then the really strange build-up with the Champions League final 3 days before, and the Europa League final just before that. So it was a really unique situation, but right through that competition, really good quality of games. We learned more about our team in those moments than we did in the rest of the year, really. So we were pleased to have got to...
Committed to getting 100 million people 20% more active by 2025.
Jackie, thanks very much. Let's get a check on the weather forecast now.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, we've got plenty of cloud and a little patchy rain in the north today, while more general rain is heading in for tomorrow. It will be mild for most, but it'll be rather grey, and there'll be quite a chilly wind in the north and west. Most places will be overcast all afternoon with fog on the hills, but there will be some sunny breaks. Areas to the north and east of high ground look most favoured, and it'll be mainly dry, but northern Scotland will see rain on and off, while there may be the odd spot of rain or drizzle elsewhere. Northern Scotland will see the rain clearing tonight, leaving it dry just about everywhere, but the west of Ireland and the Hebrides will turn wet and windy by morning. And there'll be gales on many western coasts and severe gales in the northwest. Cloudy skies will keep it mild for most. Monday will bring rain and strong winds to most, but England will be mainly dry into the afternoon.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up in just a moment, we'll be discussing the real cost of HS2. A report seen by Sky News calls spending on the project out of control. welcome back. You're watching Sky News. More now on our main story. And President Trump has warned that the United States has targeted 52 sites in Iran and is ready to hit them very fast and very hard if the country follows through on its plan to take revenge over the killing of its top military general. The body of Qasem Soleimani has now been repatriated to Iran. Sky's Ian Woods reports in Washington.
Does this look like a conflict in which calmer heads are prevailing? Or does this look like preparation for war? While more US troops deploy to the region, their commander-in-chief appeared to ignore the public briefings of his staff about de-escalating the crisis. 24 hours after he stuck largely to scripted remarks justifying the missile strike which killed Qasem Soleimani, Donald Trump issued a series of threatening tweets. Let this serve as a warning that if Iran strikes any Americans or American assets, we have targeted 52 Iranian sites, representing the 52 American hostages taken by Iran many years ago. Some at a very high level and important to Iran and Iranian culture. And those targets and Iran itself will be hit very fast and very hard. The USA wants no more threats. The 52 hostages harks back to the beginning of the US-Iranian schism 41 years ago. The American embassy in Tehran was overrun by revolutionary students, and diplomatic staff were held prisoner for 444 days. That standoff ultimately cost President Jimmy Carter a second term in the White House. Donald Trump is evoking that memory to justify his uncompromising approach to this 2020 crisis. But threatening cultural as well as military targets will enrage Iranians further, and carrying out such attacks could constitute an international war crime. The official mourning for Iran's top military commander still has 3 days to go before his burial in his hometown. The likely retaliation for his death is forcing the UK to increase security. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace announced that the Royal Navy would resume protection of British vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. HMS Montrose and HMS Defender will be deployed as they were last year after an oil tanker was seized and others attacked. The aftermath of the killing of Qasem Soleimani has already seen rockets fired close to the US embassy in Baghdad. There's also been an apparent cyber attack on an American government website. This should be the homepage of the Federal Depository Library program. Much worse is expected. Ian Woods, Sky News, Washington.
Now, Sky's Jonathan Samuels is in Australia, and a little earlier he spoke to one man who was forced to flee his home and lost everything over the last few days.
We're here at an evacuation centre in the middle of town. Many people have had to come here because they've lost their homes. So let's speak to a couple now. This is Glenn in Montana. Thanks very much for coming over to speak to us. You've been here for a couple of days, haven't you? Tell me what happened to you, Glenn.
Basically, we lost our home. We lost everything we had. I got my family out, got all our animals out, which was 13 dogs. 13 dogs all up, including the 4 puppies and 4 horses. And here we go. We basically got arrived here with nowhere to go.
So you've been camping effectively for the last couple of days?
Correct, yeah. Yep, 2 cars. We upgraded the tents yesterday.
I mean, it's so traumatic, isn't it, to lose not only your home, but everything that was inside?
It's... words can't describe it. Words can't describe it. It's been a very, very stressful 4 days. Very overwhelming. Yeah, it's unbelievable. We just got a soldier on.
Have you been back to have a look?
Myself, no, but my wife has. A couple of things survived, very minor things, but yeah, basically most of it's unretrieved, just beyond burn.
Yeah. And Montana, how about you and your brothers and sisters? How are you coping?
I'm coping very well with my sister. I'm just glad she came out before the fire hit her. If she didn't get out, I would have just ran there and got her. And if she would have made more out, we could have saved everything else before the fire hit us. And yeah, everything's up.
Yeah, I suppose the most important thing is that it doesn't matter about possessions, does it? You've all got each other. You've got some accommodation sorted, haven't you, Glenn, for the next few days?
We have temporarily, yeah. We're hoping to have more long-term within the next week. So, fingers crossed.
Tragically, the wildfires have also had a catastrophic impact on wildlife in Australia. Stuart Blanche from WWF Australia told Sky News that as many as 1 billion animals may have been killed so far.
Across all of Australia, more than 14 million acres of forest and woodland have burnt. And so our rough estimate, it is closer to 1 billion animals will have died or will die from these fires. That includes the reptiles and the birds and the mammals that the ecologists mentioned, but also things like bats and frogs and insects that are not included in that earlier estimate. So the impact is a lot bigger, and we will never know for sure. And animals that made it to the fires will continue to die in the next weeks and months because of dehydration, starvation, disease, and being an easier prey for feral cats and foxes. Australian wildlife is well adapted to cope with normal bushfires, but this is not normal. This is a climate emergency driven bushfire catastrophe, and a lot of our wildlife simply cannot get away from the fires. They're too fast, they're too big, they're too hot. So even animals that are not being burnt to death are cooked because of the extreme temperatures, or they get very confused and lost because of the smoke haze. So our animals don't stand a chance from these massive mega fires that burn, flames up to 200 feet high.
Now, the cost of the High Speed 2 rail project has been described as out of control in a report seen by Sky News. The former deputy chair of the government's independent review into HS2, Lord Berkeley, claims Parliament was misled and that the cost of the project will rise to £107 billion, 3 times its original estimate. Our Home Affairs editor, Jason Farrell, reports.
Last August, the government launched an independent review into HS2 to assess its affordability and benefits. A leak of the report appeared to suggest the high-speed rail line was still worthwhile. But the deputy chair of the review team disagreed. Lord Berkeley has now released his own assessment, seen by Sky News, in which he says the budget is out of control. The project was first estimated at $34 billion in 2012. In 2015, when it passed Parliament, the figure increased to $56 billion. And only a few months ago, the current chairman of the project, Cook, did a stocktake and said it would in fact cost $88 billion. But Lord Berkeley's estimate is it will cost $107 billion.
I believe that Parliament's been misled because the costs were clearly known to the Department of Transport and I believe ministers 3 or 4 years ago. There's a lot of evidence for that, and the costs at that stage, they were saying, well, they were over $100 billion. Now I think the figure, which I believe is about right, is $107 billion. It's an enormous figure.
When MPs green-lighted this project, the central question was, does HS2 offer value for money? Now, Lord Berkeley argues that at the point of that decision, Parliament was badly misinformed about the costs. Now, HS2 has told me that they have rigorous accounting and reporting processes, and they have been completely transparent with the government. This area in Euston, where the London end starts, was subject to one of more than 20,000 compulsory purchase orders on land. The man who had to relinquish the property says he was underpaid and that HS2 knew their costs would rise.
There must be accountability for these people. They've impacted negatively 22,000 claimants. They've ripped off the taxpayer. And if they are allowed to get away with it, this country is in big trouble.
Absolutely. Crackley Wood hosts one of 5 camps set up down the route of the line where environmentalists and local residents say they will try to disrupt the diggers.
HS2 is a railway that up until now has been running on lines. The whole thing's only ever got this far because it's been lobbied for by the construction industry. The truth is now finally coming out, and as I keep saying, HS2 has never been more likely of being cancelled than it is right now.
It's not being NIMBYs, this is a national issue that we are all paying for as taxpayers, and actually that money could be much better, much more wisely spent.
Lord Berkeley's report says taxpayers might now only get 60p back on every pound spent on HS2, but others argue the investment is crucial for the overall UK economy.
It needs to be built in full
and it needs to be built alongside Northern Powerhouse Rail. This is not a choice of either or. The north of England needs to be better connected with the rest of the country, as well as being better connected across the north.
Lord Berkeley concludes the government should either scrap large parts of the line or recognise the reduced cost benefit. But HS2 says it's cooperated with the review team and will await publication of the government's official report. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Well, in response to Jason's report, the Department for Transport have sent us this statement. The government commissioned the OICK review to provide advice on how and whether to proceed with HS2 with an independent panel representing a range of viewpoints. Lord Berkeley's report represents his personal view. You're watching Sky News. Coming up after the break. Could artificial intelligence be the key to helping you to keep your New Year's goals?
I'm Hannah Stock with the latest showbiz news. A warning, some flash photography is coming up. America Ferrera is adding to her family in the new year. The actress took to Instagram to announce she's pregnant with baby number 2. Ferrera stars in the NBC comedy Superstore, now in its 5th season. Joaquin Phoenix brought his mother Arlen and Jennifer Lopez brought her husband Alex Rodriguez to Hollywood's first awards event of 2020, the Palm Springs International Film Festival. Phoenix and Lopez were among the honorees at the festival's opening night gala. Others receiving awards included Bombshell star Charlize Theron and Pain and Glory star Antonio Banderas.
Salma is my friend since we met actually at Desperado, and she is actually an actress that I admire very much. In a way, I need to have a little bit of admiration for my friends too. Not totally professional, could be another type of admiration, but yes, and I feel for her like that, as I feel for Pedro Almodovar too. 40 years of relationship, 8 movies together, that put me right here now talking to you.
So a Desperado reunion would not be a bad thing?
No, but I don't know if I would do another Desperado. I don't know if I'm just too old for Desperado. Never? Okay, well, thank you.
And comedian Kathy Griffin wed her longtime boyfriend Randy Bick on New Year's Day. Grace and Frankie star Lily Tomlin officiated. Griffin tipped off her fans on social media a few hours before the ceremony and later posted a video clip from the nuptials. The couple began dating in 2011.
Now, could artificial intelligence be the secret to working off all those extra post-Christmas pounds? Scientists in Bristol say they've created the world's first robot fitness trainer. So Sky's Dan Whitehead went to be put through his paces to see if it really works. Let's take a look.
Think about getting ready to start running.
Meet your new gym buddy. As thousands hit the treadmill post-Christmas, it could be robots that keep our New Year resolutions intact. Scientists at the University of the West of England have worked with fitness instructors to develop what it claims is the world's first socially intelligent robot trainer.
So we had a real fitness instructor teaching the robot when to give encouragement, what encouragements to give, when is the right time to do that, and we wanted to see whether we could take the human social intelligence of the fitness instructor and really program that into the robot.
10 runners took part in the 12-week study.
The robot that was trained by the fitness instructor was much more engaging and much more personalised as well. So our robot was able to learn how to motivate different people differently. So we found that our innovative machine learning approach was really able to capture our fitness instructors' very high-level social intelligence and really get that into the robot.
Good work.
So Lewis, what's it like taking instructions from a robot?
It's interesting. It's definitely a unique experience. Once you get over the initial shock, it's very motivating. I think.
Swims right out, look.
Have a go.
So cheap. Power should be
So
fine.
the robot is now telling me I've got to go back to a run, which is what I'll do.
I know you can push harder than this. Can you turn the speed up?
Telling me to work harder. It is a bit weird having a robot to the right of you giving you encouragement, but this perhaps is the future. Fitness and technology is already a multi-billion-pound industry. Machine learning and AI is becoming the norm in the fitness industry. From trainers that send vital stats to your smartphone, to on-demand classes streamed into your home, keeping fit now goes hand in hand with our love of tech.
Technology is becoming incorporated in the fitness industry more than ever. We've got sort of heart rate monitors on our wrists, we've got apps that tell us workout programs, and now we've even got sort of visual sensory data that can give sort of technique analysis using your smartphone camera. So the technology and our fitness is becoming more blurred now.
Robots may not be replacing personal trainers just yet, but for many, technology will play a big role in getting fit this new year. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Bristol.
Let's go check on the forecast now.
So cheap.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, we've got plenty of cloud and a little patchy rain in the north today, while more general rain is heading in for tomorrow. It's going to be mild for most today, but it will be rather grey, and there'll be quite a chilly wind in the north and west. Most places will be overcast with some fog on the hills, but there will be some sunny breaks. Areas to the north and east of high ground look most favoured, and it will be dry. Northern Scotland will see rain on and off.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
This is Sky News coming up at 11 o'clock. A war of words erupts on Twitter between the US and Iran over the killing of the military commander Qasem Soleimani. We'll have all the latest in just a minute. See you then.
Been here before.